Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Newman. I'm the host of the Sovereign Bitcoin for Business podcast. Thank you for joining us for this episode. And today, my guest is a fellow Sovereign consultant, Donovan. Do you want to say hello?
Hi, everybody. Donovan Gibson. I'm a consultant with Sovreign, and it's great to be here, Jeff, and I look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the spirit of you can just do things, we're doing our first podcast here together. And yeah, I thought the topic could be open. It's a little bit of your story, your Bitcoin journey, but also, even though this is the Bitcoin for Business podcast, and we're helping businesses with Bitcoin, I think your background with higher education, being a parent, working with universities is really interesting. So dig into that too and see how it weaves together. But yeah, before we kick off, what is what's your orange pill story? How did you become a Bitcoiner?
Uh, it sounds like most Bitcoin stories. You find found Bitcoin in 2014. Funny enough, I was watching a documentary on the Occupy Wall Street movement at the same time, holding the Bitcoin white paper in my hand, and I just found myself kind of glancing up at the television while reading this white paper over and over again. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And so got into Bitcoin around 2014, and like really any true Bitcoiner, got a little too cute with it, and you know got mesmerized by the words of things like DeFi and transaction throughput and smart contracts, and shamefully messed a lot of it up, but and it's a typical story you hear from a lot of true Bitcoiners. Well, we do feel shame, but we feel obligated to share that story. Almost reminds me of a quote from, I believe it's Winston Churchill, who said something about playing the game for more than you can afford to lose, and that's how you really understand the game. And so we come with that wisdom. So that's my story. I'm a former college soccer coach. Worked in university, teach Bitcoin, run a small underground Bitcoin club, and really enjoy engaging with young minds and students and getting them to dive into Austrian economics and the technical side of Bitcoin and the non-technical side of Bitcoin with what's going on with current events. It's fascinating, the pliability of young minds. So it's really fun to engage with them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the early adopters of Bitcoin were counterculture, right? You mentioned Occupy Wall Street, Austrian economics, and it's that's not exactly something that's taught in the mainstream. That's not the orthodox economics flavor in mainstream universities. So it's do you see it on campus, Austrian economics and the questions about it?
Not really, not at all. It's really, the Keynesian economics has really overtaken most, if not all, universities. I believe it's about 11 universities from what I can count in the United States that have courses or actually deep dives into Austrian economics here in the United States. And that's interesting, because it's diametrically opposed to what we find in our economic system. But as students start to engage with it, they can really see the delta difference between the two. And it's really cool to see them in real time piece together current events and how the monetary system works with Keynesian versus Austrian and Bitcoin. And it takes a while, but it's really interesting to watch the wheels turn and then come to a conclusion. I'm sure you've had that same moment, and along with your story, I'm sure you've gone down the deep dive, but you also messed up a little.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like Bitcoin being a subculture in the past, but now it's integrated into like the traditional finance, and we are seeing it pop up at universities. I too am tracking what universities are teaching Bitcoin or have courses or have professors. And you're right, it's like it's under 10 or 20 at most. And I've always thought it was interesting where it's like if you were mentoring, a young student who's about to enroll in college and say, I'm thinking of being an economics major, I'm interested in Bitcoin. And it's like, you may not learn anything about Bitcoin when you come out of this, And so, it's kind of an open question as a parent too, is like, what kind of advice would you give an older teenager or a young college student who's going to university and interested in learning Bitcoin? It's like, do the professors even know it, and or are they against it? So it goes into like the Bitcoin journey is there's filled with a lot of traps, and I think in our personal stories, it's you have to be interested and do your own research and be open-minded, and these are all great attributes for young students. But again, it goes into the university system. Are they gonna where do they learn? Where do they turn to? And so, were you a professor of teaching Bitcoin on campus?
Yes, yes. I taught a course. They let me teach a course, and so that was an arduous process. And so there's a big part of me that, whereas, yeah, I think students can learn Bitcoin in university, I almost also don't want them to. I want them to kind of go down that own self-discovery and self-education and that self-transformation and that rabbit hole of writings and teachings and podcasts and books. I feel there's something so transformational about that. And I feel my role now is most along the lines with the students I interact with is kind of a guardrail. They come with questions and publications they may have read or a video or a podcast they saw. And it makes for such engaging, deep conversation where I see that student start to educate themselves and start to adopt the value of a Bitcoin standard. And that's where, the wheels of higher education are slow, they're centralized at times, and I don't want to diminish anything that's in the Bitcoin space right now in higher education. The University of Wyoming does a wonderful job with the Bitcoin Research Institute. Their publication, Resistance Money, I love. Nick Bhatia at USC, one of my favorite authors with Layered Money, just put out a new book. Our own consultant, Harold Tan, he teaches at UCLA and just gave a beautiful presentation a couple of weeks ago on Bitcoin, was very forthcoming with his own story, very impactful. So yes, I think it can be a possibility, but I also feel it's on the individual to really undertake that hero's journey, and kind of
Yeah.
feel that I'm a guardrail to help them along the way.
There's a lot to learn at university, and even if there is a Bitcoin major or a specialty in Bitcoin, that's so new, and again, maybe less than five programs exist, and we're tracking them, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, go to the university for the reasons and the major, and there are student clubs, there are supplemental information. I think you like mentioned books and podcasts, things like that. But also, yeah, if you can find a professor, it's a good intro to start a class. But the other thing too is the Bitcoin journey takes time. This isn't an overnight thing. So, I think we talked about this prior, but like, what advice would I give to a young person? I'd be like, um, work a summer job. Did you know that you could get a million satoshis, a million sats for like $1,000 right now? And it's like not financial advice, but a million sats. That's measurable. It's a million of something, and the dollar value today, was it April 8th, 2025, is about 1,000 US dollars to have a million sats. Now, if you could stack that, then you could take self custody. You could have some skin in the game. Now you have a vested interest to learn, and then just let time do its thing, where you just go back to school, live your life, and then upon graduation 4 years later, you'll see what digital scarcity compared to unlimited fiat does, where it'll probably raise in dollar terms over 4 years, not over 4 hours or 4 months. You're not trading it. It's not gambling. It's actually making savings cool again, or actually making savings work. Um, One of the things that we talk about with Bitcoin is unit bias. Like, what's a lesson you could teach somebody, which is not just for young people. Unit bias exists for old people too, which is, hey, if I can't have a whole gold bar, I don't want any. It's like, well, maybe you should start with a coin, maybe, if I can't have a mansion, I don't want to own a home. It's like, that sounds like entitlement to me. But the thing with Bitcoin, with digital, is people say, oh, because Bitcoins were worth less dollars in the past, you could stack lots of Bitcoins for $1,000. Well, today a Bitcoin is worth $100,000 approximately. So all of a sudden, it's like, am I priced out of this? And it's like, no, you're not, because you don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. You can buy Satoshis. They can be broken up. But again, the human psychology of unit bias is to say, well, I guess I missed the boat. I feel like I'm late to it. By the way, everyone does. And then they go into these altcoins and the scams, and they go to the casino to play catch up, which they'll never do. It'll never work. And we can go into the reasons why. But so if you have a fresh mind or someone who's not biased or too far gone, so to speak, the advice I would say is go to school, listen to your parents, learn as much as you can, include Bitcoin in your journey, in your liberal arts philosophical journey. You don't necessarily have to major in it, but certainly could supplement a mainstream economics degree, right? To learn the other way of thinking, which is Austrian economics and so forth. Find a professor, join a club, but really, it's the story of Bitcoin is like overcoming these lessons and journey. And you mentioned falling prey to things and then getting out of traps and scams and avoiding them and seeing them, and you still come out the other end as holding, saving, and seeing the value and using Bitcoin, but knowing why and why it's different. And yeah, some of this just can't be taught. Some of this is a journey. It's layers of trial and error. It takes time, and that's why I think like even like a 4-year degree timeline is to start with something like a personal savings account, like a time capsule, and like you come out on the other end. Let's not underestimate what 1 million satoshis will be in what 2028. That's after another halvening. Like, so again, what's a halvening? That's a good question. Yeah, every 4 years. Like, so there's all these lessons that could be taught to a new Bitcoiner, but the expectation is start with something and wait 4 years, and that's the time frame to measure it. And then we can even get into, are you measuring in dollars still, or are you measuring a Satoshi equals a Satoshi, a Bitcoin equals a Bitcoin? Don't worry about the dollar price. That's a different conversation. So I know you understand what I'm saying, but maybe for our listeners, if you could expand on what I was saying there, of like what lessons, because you're also a parent, what lessons do you tell your kids or your young adult children when it comes to Bitcoin in terms of how to approach it, how to save it, how to not be a gambler about it, because it's not the casino. We're not talking about Vegas casino.
Right, right, and with my own children, um, they also have a very low time preference because they've seen their they've seen their father and what his value system has created. And for example, I have a son who, upon graduation, went out and worked in a national park for 2 years in order to earn some money for college, and he lived in the dirt, cut trees, removed invasive species for 2 years, and going to use that money to become an electrician. And in that time, he's going to get paid, and he's like, Dad, I'm stacking stats for 2 years and for 2 to 4 years until I graduate, and then be an electrician and have my business on a Bitcoin standard, and I think it's that low time preference, which is a valuable lesson to get into the young mind of a young person or a student or really anyone who first discovers Bitcoin, because you often hear that, hey, the first thing you see is this thing goes up and to the right, and that is all it's good for. And then that leads you down to, like you said, the crypto casino. Oh, hey, this other coin goes up 150% compared to, and then you have to kind of teach them, hey, it works this way for a reason. Security. It's slow for a reason, and just kind of understand that, hey, you got to hold this thing for at least 4 years. And when you talk to students and you get them at that freshman year and you kind of show them, and one of the things I did was like, hey, let's share some Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. Hey, download this wallet. Here you go. Remember this day. It's time stamped in there. Okay, let's take a look at this in 4 years. And they kind of see how things happen. Yeah, it's very volatile in that time, but at the end of that cycle, they understand and made it, like you said, savings is cool again, you know? And it's a hard value for students to adopt, because right now there are two giant data points as we recruit students today, and they're growing exponentially. And that first data point is the generation today has a huge explosive propensity to trade problem solving for distraction. Okay, the constant pleasuring of themselves of, oh, I gotta do this, and not focus on what I need to do. So that process of self-awareness is being eliminated. And I think when you get on a low time preference and a Bitcoin standard, it kind of reverses that. You become a little bit more self-aware of what you're doing. Okay, and that second giant data point is a laundry list of mental health issues. Now, I'm not saying they don't exist, but I will say I feel we're a little bit hyper-focused on them. And I think in learning Bitcoin, the low time preference, the value to verify and not trust, when you start adopting those things, it starts to become a little bit of an antidote to a couple of these things that are happening to young people. And I've seen it with the students that I worked with. And don't get me wrong, not every student stays and sticks around and believes in the Bitcoin journey. But the students have such a transformational time with their involvement with Bitcoin in researching Austrian economics, the technicalities of how Bitcoin works, and unit bias. And a lot of them do say, "Hey, it's at 100,000. What's the point?" And you have to kind of have a little teachable moment with them in regards to that. Like, hey, this isn't the end. This is only the beginning. We're right where internet started to get adopted globally. Put that in your mind and think about that. So it's a constant battle. It's a battle that I really enjoy and love. And that's the other thing about Bitcoin. And let me ask you this, Jeff.
Mhm.
How do you feel when you talk to Bitcoin, integrating it into a business, and someone just shuts you down, says no? What's your internal mindset? What's your response?
Great point. Yeah, great question. I mean, one thing you had just said was we're teaching young people to save and have a low time preference. But at the same time, the cool thing with Bitcoin is you can spend and replace. So let's say you have a stack and you're saving, but then you have the opportunity to reward a merchant for accepting Bitcoin. You can break off a little, you can pay your bill, right, with Bitcoin or Lightning. And for the listeners that don't know what Lightning is, it's the layer two. It's, faster, instantaneous transactions, which solves all the criticisms of Bitcoin and tries to open up the door with FUD of how
Right.
something else is better. It's like, no, the base layer of Bitcoin works perfectly. Don't change it. It's done. It works. But then the layer two is called it's called Lightning, and there's other ones where again that's the instantaneous, how you would close your bar tab, right? Pay for a coffee with Lightning. And my point is, with young people, with anyone holding Bitcoin and saving in Bitcoin, it's okay to spend your Bitcoin. If you're focused on keeping your stack for saving, you just replace it that day. But now you're helping the Bitcoin ecosystem. The key thing of this, let's talk about what's the point of saving in Bitcoin. It's to protect your purchasing power. And when people say, "Oh, it's 100K, like and now it's going to crash," it's like that's a lack of creativity. There is no top because fiat has no bottom or whatever the phrase is. The point is, young people, even people our age, it's like, hey, do you think the national debt's going to stop at some point? Do you think military spending is going to cap? Do you think the government's not going to inflate their currency? It's like, oh, Bitcoin's 100K today. It's like, well, add a zero every 5 years. Not financial advice, but after a halvening, which is every 4 years, I would, say that Bitcoin's market cap is 2 trillion today. I listened to Michael Saylor and others were demonetizing the gold market cap, which is like 20 trillion. So is Bitcoin better than gold? Well, Bitcoin's a digital transformation and has more features and utility than analog gold. So if gold is a store of value and Bitcoin's better, and the traditional world is seeing that from businesses, individuals, governments, sovereign wealth funds, I would say that, we are on track to overtaking the gold market cap within the next 5 years. So it's 2025, so 2029, 2030, it's reasonable. So by the time a freshman graduates college, we're going to go through another halvening. And does Bitcoin 10x? And it's okay to say it. It's a commodity. It's digital. It's not a security. We can talk about it. I was listening to Michael Saylor's 21 Truths of Bitcoin recently, and it's like, as a publicly traded corporate officer, you could talk about the price of Bitcoin. It's not a security. It's okay. And so the question you just asked though is, what do you do when you interface with a business that, is not interested? It's like, are you not interested because it's not user friendly to accept Bitcoin? Or are you not interested because you don't understand it? And I mean, the point of this podcast, the point of any conversation in personal as well as professional life is to help people who are intellectually honest and interested. If you have someone who's not intellectually honest and is against the idea of Bitcoin for whatever reason or hesitation, it can't help you. So the message won't work. So that's okay. And if that's a business, that's too bad, because really, like, we have a point of view, and we think it's unique, but it's open. And it's like, this is an open network. You talk about like open source network, it's open protocol. There's no permission, it's global. Like, there's no intermediaries. Like, we can transact peer to peer. You don't have to go through your government or a bank. This is very unique, and that can be done with business. Again, we have partners like applications. We can name drop, payment and, wrappers, and that make it user friendly for a point of sale for a business, whether, you own a coffee shop or what have you. But like, I mean, the real question is, when you meet with someone, is it's okay. You're not stupid if you don't understand Bitcoin. Like, less than 1 or 3% of the world understands Bitcoin, and you have to want to understand Bitcoin. So it's not that. Usually it's more of a psychology thing of like, is it your ego? Is it
Right.
your, preconceived notions? Or like, it's not an IQ test, it's an ego test. Going back to my personal story, I just approached Bitcoin as, what is this? I don't understand this. There's probably something there. Uh, there's enough things about it that sound like, like open, global, network, digital, scarce. Like, I'm like, okay, like, there's enough there, and then I just started listening and like learning and being open-minded. So my journey started with, I was interested. I mean, you can't help someone who's not interested, right? You can send them podcasts and books, they're not going to read it. But two, they have to be intellectually honest and open. And it's totally cool to be skeptical up front, but presented with new information that can be verified factually. The question is like, and then what's really cool about owners and personal savers who have adopted Coin Standard is, over 4, 8, 10 years, I mean, their lives improve. Your purchasing power has been protected. So I'll give an example. The 5-year chart of Bitcoin in US dollars is up. Oh my God, Bitcoin just crashed. Like, did it though? It's up 1,000% over 5 years.
Right.
What happened 5 years ago? The pandemic. So had you bought some Bitcoin, not a whole Bitcoin, but just had you allocated to Bitcoin, get off zero, do something, whatever increment, skin in the game, learn. As you learn, you can feel more confident and you increase your position size. You can save, get paid in Bitcoin. I took my paychecks and converted to Bitcoin. Like, if you're a merchant, you can incentivize Bitcoin payments, save it, so forth. I mean, you put this all together, but over time, that's the track record over at least a 4-year period. Because again, the criticisms are it's volatile. It's like, no, the dollar is, I get it, but it's volatile in the short term. But we're not talking about day traders. Uh, business owners, individual savers, students, whomever we're talking to and helping out. We're not talking to gamblers or traders. That's not it, And so, yeah, no, I think. Did I answer your question?
You did, and here's the thing, and another quote from Saylor. 2020 until now looks very different. The regulatory landscape, the amount of publicly traded companies putting Bitcoin on their treasury. The repeal of SAB 121. So much is developing favorably in the Bitcoin space. and but it's happening suddenly. Okay, it's happening very fast, and my shot across the bow right now, especially for businesses, is you have about 5 years to gain an unfair advantage with your competition, to adopt it as a treasury asset, to accept payments, to be a part of this ecosystem that preserves your purchasing power over time without it being debased by a weaponized political currency. You have, and that's my opinion, 5 years, again, not financial advice, but just staying in tune with the regulatory landscape and what is going on in the space, and I think Michael Saylor said it best when he kind of compared it to Amazon or Apple. Like, hey, you want something everybody needs, nobody really understands, and nobody can destroy. And that is the Bitcoin ethos right there, and it's really, we're in a different time. Like he also said, hey, 20 to 2024 were the crazy years. And it literally was. Talking to a business about adopting Bitcoin during that time would almost have been insane with the amount of fallout between Three Arrows Capital, Celsius, BlockFi, Nexus. It was a literal dumpster fire of companies blowing up and stealing funds from individuals. So
Can I make a
now it
comment on
looks
that? So
absolutely.
for outsiders, they're like, oh, that proves that the industry is a scam. And we're like, well, the Bitcoin industry is not the crypto industry. And two, Bitcoin holders or hodlers or savers were not chasing yield, fiat yield. So therefore, if you had kept your Bitcoin in cold storage, take it off of the exchange, put it into a cold wallet, take responsibility, go all the way. By the way, I love the image of the key behind your head. Take control of your keys. That's very good. Um, then the FTX blow up, didn't apply to you. I didn't use them. I didn't trust them from the beginning, right? And then the three arrows and all these TradFi yield chasing things. Where does the yield come from? Can you answer that question? It's like again, so all these things that was the crypto scammy layers on top of Bitcoin, and all these grifts and scams exist to separate you from your Bitcoin. So as long as you followed the proper protocols up front, you could weather the storm. Where you're like, okay, this is newsworthy, and it's interesting, and there's a reckoning that had to happen. Um, and if you have to learn a lesson, you burn your hand on the stove. Don't do it again. That goes for trading and all these things. But yeah, your point though is well taken, right?
Yeah, and I think, and that's why I'm really thankful for a company like Sovreign. It's education first, from the very basic fundamentals. Like, hey, if you just want to learn how it works or why Bitcoin exists, we're happy to talk to you about that. Because I'm sure we can all remember our downfall in the Bitcoin space, and how nice it would have been for someone to come in and say, hey, this is how this works. Let's have a conversation about this. And that education is just so vital today. Scams still exist, and I think education is the foundation. And I'm glad to be a part of a company like Sovreign that is really taking that as a first principle.
That's a great point. And for the listeners who don't know, we both work for Sovereign. And what is Sovereign? It's a Bitcoin first, Bitcoin only consulting educational platform partnership. And we're here basically to help businesses and individuals with their Bitcoin journey, where the one thing we're going to do is keep you on the Bitcoin journey and help you with your education, your maturity, avoid traps. And that's it. We're not interested in the other altcoins. We won't diversify you into it. So that's the line, is if you're looking for a consulting or partnership company where it's Bitcoin only, Bitcoin first, and that's how we all came together. And with our own lessons and our own journeys, again, what's the value add? How can we help people? It's just because you took a college course. just because you go to sailor.org and he's got the Bitcoin, economics lessons, and you have Saifedean who has, the paid courses, and he
Hmm.
wrote the Bitcoin Standard and others. So there's a lot of courses you can take. And again, in my search for where is Bitcoin in higher education, you can go to like the MOOCs, the massive open online courses. You can go to Coursera and search, for Bitcoin or blockchain, and you get, Princeton, and you got great names to have an open source course. But it's again, is it conflating Bitcoin and blockchain? Is the professor a Bitcoin maximalist? Did they read the foundational stuff from the Nakamoto Institute and Parker Lewis? And
Right. Mm.
so, and then is the consultancy company, are they open to digital assets and they could help you do your own blockchain? And like, just like projects that don't make sense up front. If or like, again, we could walk away from our clients too. If you want to go down that path, we're going to stick to Bitcoin. So you should be with us. And so again, it's one of these things where just because you're taking free information from, online courses, college, whatever, doesn't necessarily mean you'll come out the other end with the right learn. Like it's a really interesting space where like where are the credentials? And
Right.
could I actually, you'd mentioned that to teach your college course, your university had asked you to get some credentials. You don't have to name drop anything, but just the high level, like here's what I wanted to talk about was like credentialism and how there's so many people like on LinkedIn, they're like, well, if I don't have a credential for that, like, is there
Right.
a master class? It's like, even if, Michael Saylor or somebody taught a master class, that doesn't mean that when you're done with it, that you're a Bitcoin maximalist. So like even if you have a master professor or a master educator, the question is like a lot of this is learned by doing, and then a lot of this is,
Exactly.
in my opinion, human psychology, where some people just can't be helped because they're going to go back to the casino.
Right. Yeah. So the credential world is almost like the Wild West, I guess you could say, in terms of Bitcoin, because they conflate a lot of, like you said, Bitcoin with crypto and things like that. But the university was like, hey, if you're going to teach a course, you're going to need some kind of credential. So I picked one. It was a test. I kind of reviewed it. I took it, passed it, showed them the credentials, and they said, okay. That being said, like it is also kind of a personal journey. I think and like you said, the world of Bitcoin is so open source. The Bitcoiners are so giving with their knowledge and their resources. Sailor.org, My First Bitcoin or Mi Primer Bitcoin does a great job. You can look at all their documents online and with study materials, which I do feel that arduous academic learning is also very important in this space, that you have to go that kind of test yourself of your knowledge. I think that's also a good thing. So the credential space is kind of the wild, wild west, but there are some beautiful resources out there. And plenty of which that you can research and find. But the second they start conflating it with blockchain or crypto, it's something that I know I would divert away from.
Yeah, and I'm totally with you. I think all Bitcoiners are generous if you come with a genuine question. If you're truly asking good questions, everyone's happy to help. And I think as a follow up, maybe we could even like link in the show notes or just leave our door open in terms of like, how to follow up of if you needed a book or a podcast recommendation or some of these things. It's like there are free resources, ones that, I stand behind or I recommend for new people. And yeah, it's just asking the right questions where if you're interested, there's plenty of Bitcoin 101 resources that are available.
Absolutely. And to piggyback on that, as you talk to Bitcoiners, and if I'm talking to a company that I want them to adopt Bitcoin and they tell me no, or go through this and they say no, a Bitcoiner is still going to Bitcoin. Their motivation really isn't getting the sale. Their ultimate motivation is that low time preference. They want their world to be at a Bitcoin standard where the labor and production of those around them doesn't get debased by a weaponized political currency. So we're going to Bitcoin no matter what, and that's one thing that, and we're going to give information, and we're going to share, and there's so much out there, and it just comes from a place of, hey, build a better world, build the world you want, to where others value and labor is honored at the maximum level, and that's a motivation of a Bitcoiner, I think. And that is, I think you can learn so much from that, and I think it's a great value system of which to build on.
Yeah. And I think is like it's a niche market today, but it's growing, is if you find vendors and customers who transact in Bitcoin, for example, if someone creates high quality beef, right, or grows amazing wine, so they're experts in their craft, but also they're high quality, whether and it's something that's not diluted from the fiat culture. So it really is beef, and it really is, wine, and it's not, corn syrup soda, things like, it's not
Yeah.
fiat food. But the real point is like, hey, if you're going to make me part as a consumer profile, if you're going to have me part with my Bitcoin, spend and replace, but to spend it on a beef and a wine and what have you, it has to be really high quality goods. And so all of a sudden we have low time preference, high quality goods and services. And then in the Bitcoin community, you have, if you're being authentic and using the right language, you have, again, the most loyal customers who are engaged. And again, if and then you're stacking Bitcoin, which protects your purchasing power and can give your company, once on the balance sheet, runway, right? And so we're just talking about small businesses, not publicly traded
Mhm.
companies like Strategy and the others that have done the Bitcoin on the stock exchange. But just again, like a mom and pop or the butcher, the baker, you know, like if they're accepting Bitcoin, you have a startup. I mean, just imagine the runway of having your Bitcoin appreciate in dollar terms over X amount of years to then expand your business. So again, it's like it gives you more breathing room. It lowers your time preference. You can be more strategic. You can survive without running out of oxygen. And again, it's like the Bitcoin community is growing. It is, so the consumers of Bitcoin, and we talk to partners of applications, here at Sovereign, where again, the user interface is becoming easier and more integrated. So it's all coming together where, again, we're in 2025 now. It's like this is absolutely on the up and up for the next 5, 6 years and going beyond that. So I like what you were saying about that with today it's like still an unfair competitive advantage. Like you still are a trailblazer and being a little brave to adopt Bitcoin today, even though we've all heard of it. Again, like 8 out of 10 people don't understand it, even though everyone's heard of Bitcoin. So the phrase Bitcoin has been heard. Like I heard about it in 2014 when it first touched $1,000 around Thanksgiving time, but it didn't matter to me, and I moved on with my life and circled back years later to be like, oh, I should get one of those things and learn about it. But like that's because I was interested. People can dismiss it and laugh at
Mhm.
it and remember it from a time when it was immature and worth not too much or not doing too much, and forget that, oh, this kid's grown up now. Bitcoin is 16 years old. Do you know how old the euro is? It's 25. 2000.
Yeah,
So
not that
the
old either.
so again, think about adult children. It's like okay, or survive. The survivor's bias. Like once an asset. Who said this? Tom Lee, the analyst on. He was like, once an asset class reaches 2 trillion, they don't go away. So
Yep.
Bitcoin reached 2 trillion. Okay, it dipped a little bit temporarily. Okay, but it's going to demonetize the gold market cap. It's we're all guessing and watching. That it's going to 20 trillion, but then it's not stopping there. You just have to zoom out further. So again, like your kids will grow up, they'll have kids. I mean, quite frankly, this is, if you can save in Bitcoin, this is intergenerational wealth and savings, but also businesses, family businesses,
Yep.
intergenerations. Like this is the kind of thing where like if you can zoom out and think in a lower time preference. I wrote a LinkedIn thing the other day, and it was like, go to Google and put USD dollars over BTC, Bitcoin. Pick any currency, whether it's euro, Swiss, whatever is a strong currency. But then look at the time frames of 5, 10, and 15
Hmm.
years, and like, what do you notice? And you're like, oh, if you think of, here's the lesson. Here's the lesson for everybody. Bitcoin is the denominator. You need to think about Bitcoin as the denominator. So put dollars as the numerator, Bitcoin's the denominator. Zoom out 5, 10, 15 years. Again, Bitcoin's 16 years old. It will be here for another 15 years. And it's going to be here for 100 years, right? So the point is, everything's crashing in terms of Bitcoin terms. That's the epiphany. That's the thing that if you can just get that, that can really change how you look at your balance sheet, how you get your business on a Bitcoin standard. So again, as a consultant, as an educator, as a teacher, as a friend, it's having these conversations with people, individuals and businesses that are open-minded to say, it's a mental model, you know, like don't argue
Yes.
with me on the internet. Don't, this is, it's the FUD or the criticisms are outdated. If you have criticisms, it's fair to have a critical mind. Do more research, you'll overcome it. And if you have a criticism and I give you the answer, and it's correct, will you then change your mind based on the facts and the research? So like we can get you through it, And so like think of us as coaches, Sherpas, like a legal retainer for your business, but for Bitcoin. But like really it's like it's where are you? Where are you stuck? And like helping you in private too, like discrete education can be done in private. Um, One of the cool things I liked when I joined Sovreign was there was an online course, and I was like, it was interesting. So I took it, and it was like basically Bitcoin 101 online course, kind of like, are you a retail or business owner? It was so foundational that like it's for anybody, including the business owners. But that's where private consultations would go. But I took it, and it was cool because it branched out to like, here's a reading list, here's the fundamentals. If you didn't know this, this is why. But then there's YouTube videos and current events, and
Hmm.
I was like, okay, this is very, very helpful, and it's a good foundation. It's like this is what an adult who's open-minded about Bitcoin. This is what a student. This is what a retail private investor who just maybe wants to save or allocate X percentage of their portfolio to it. Um, now you can call your financial advisor, and there's ETFs, there's MicroStrategy, there's ways to get exposure to Bitcoin in addition to direct real Bitcoin and self custody, which is always available. Um, but yeah, so it's cool. And so what I liked about that is this flexibility of online education and how if we meet the right company or the right organization, we could even customize that and also maybe benefit employees. And so one of the use cases that I'm thinking about and looking for feedback from the market is, would an organization that says, oh, our employees are our biggest asset, but they actually mean it, if the HR department actually valued their employees, would they offer Bitcoin education for their employees, like help them understand the mental models, help them have a choice to get paid in Bitcoin or save in Bitcoin? By the way, we have partners. You can integrate your Bitcoin now into your 401k and your IRAs and so forth. Like, and it could be the Bitcoin ETFs, or it could be MSTR, like, that strategy. So like there's choices now. So the question is like, I personally did everything on my own, but if my employer, had my back and best, like they're looking out for me, they could be like, hey,
Absolutely.
part of the free education of working here, one of the benefits, maybe this attracts young
Hmm.
talent, maybe it keeps, seasoned talent, whatever it is. It's like, hey, it's 2025. What's this Bitcoin thing? I'm like, well, are you helping me with Bitcoin, or is this I'm on my own, So
No, great idea. I think that would be so accepted, so beneficial too, especially as Bitcoin is gaining so much in the mainstream media that I'm sure employees are going to start asking for it and asking about it. So I think that's great. And I think, like I said, 5 years to gain an advantage as an individual, as a business, and have a low time preference. I love that. So,
yeah. So I think as we're kind of coming to the end of this first podcast, hopefully the first of many, um, let's summarize. So you're a parent, you're a father, and also sometimes a teacher. So when a young person comes up to you, what's like kind of the top three bullet points you'd give for a young person who's maybe just enrolling in college and they're curious about Bitcoin? Like, what would you say to them?
Well, most of the time that experience comes with them approaching me first saying, "Hey, what do you think about this coin?" And my response is typically, "What problem does it solve?" And they're like, "Well, what do you mean? It's outperforming Bitcoin. What problem does it solve?" And they usually don't have an answer. And I said, "Well, Bitcoin solves a problem right now. The debasement of our currency, the loss of our value and time, and these types of things." So that's the first thing I tell them is I define what the problem is. Okay, what the problem is and why Bitcoin is created. And continue that debate. But that's the first thing. And the other lesson is they respond with, "Well, I can't afford a whole Bitcoin."
Mhm.
And then the next lesson is you can buy a small fraction of a Bitcoin. A Bitcoin is broken into 100 million units. And oftentimes I show them the poor college student way to get free Bitcoin. There I said, "Hey, here are some apps. Hey, you listen to a podcast on this app, they'll give you Bitcoin. Or you download this app, they'll give you Bitcoin for walking. Those kinds of things." And so
Yeah.
those are some good first lessons. And for parents, a lot of my students talk to their parents. They'll orange pill their parents, and some of them I've met a couple at graduation, and they'll say, "Hey, my son was very grateful for the relationship." They'll say, "I'm very angry that they're now a Bitcoiner and they were a business major, but they learned more from you than going to class." But I think that's great, that I've given them some hope in their lives, especially on the financial side. But yeah, so one of the quick lessons is, hey, you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. You can buy a small fraction, okay, and just start stacking from there. And like you said, great point. It makes saving cool again, because right now our savings are destroyed. Okay, it almost makes no sense to put anything in a savings account because it's destroyed by inflation.
You make a good point there. There's back in the day there was a website, a Bitcoin faucet website where you fill out a captcha, and for doing the captcha, you would get 5 Bitcoin. And
Right.
people today are like, oh, 5 Bitcoin. What's because they're thinking in today's value. But back then, let's call it 10 years ago, then it was still just pennies. So again, it was, do you value the Bitcoin? And the value it has today in dollar terms is the value of protecting your purchasing power over time. So only do people value the 10-year results. So the point is, there's some apps today where there's little faucets, but they're in Satoshis. There's was it the Fold debit card? So you load up
Right.
your own money and you get Sats back. But they have an app where you can like every day there's a little incentive, and let's say it's 15 Sats per day. Well, today that's worth pennies. But the whole point is if you stack them, value them, and let the time pass. That's the same thing of 5 Bitcoin from a captcha 10 years ago. It's like right, but it's all different units over time, but it's still protecting the value. The real question is, can you just get off of zero? So how do you get started, right? And I think the unit bias is a lesson that has to keep being repeated until someone truly, truly gets it. So that's a good one.
Yeah, and that takes a little bit more time, but it keeps them on the hook, and it keeps them learning and diving into it. A lot of my students, they like to say the mantra, "We are all Satoshi," and I tell them no. I tell them we're all Han Solo. We were a bunch of degens. We came in for the sick, quick gains, and we stuck around for the revolution. Okay, and at the end of 4 years, some of my students they repeat that to me, and it makes me laugh, because they're also in it for the revolution, which is pretty cool.
That is cool. Yeah. It's what is it? It's not a get rich quick. It's a don't get poor slowly. Right. So that's a
Exactly.
cool one. Yeah. Perfect. So then let's okay, so that's you as the father hat, the professor, life on campus, and then the counterculture. The last one is here at Sovereign. business to business consulting and just kind of keeping our door open for business applications, use cases, coaching, educating, integrating. By the way, we have a partner network too, so it's if the
Yeah.
business needs to integrate the point of sale, the purchase, so forth. There's what Sovereign doesn't do. We have a whole partner network, so we can refer to trusted Bitcoin, high integrity partners. So I guess my question is, last question is, in the world of Bitcoin consulting here at Sovereign, and the outcome of this podcast is, you know, is it like a psychological because like we don't know what industry sometimes or the use case, we're kind of like trying to reverse engineer like who is our ideal customer. And it's like it's funny is like is it a psychological profile? Are they into like beef tallow and cutting out seed oils? You see the memes on the internet, and so it's interesting. It's like it's not counterculture, but it is subcultures that have been red pilled about other aspects of our society sometimes, who
Right.
seem to be the funnel for early adopters of Bitcoin. And so there's all these things, homeschooling children and these types of things. And I'm like, okay. Um, but again, it's like it's all values alignment. What do we value here? And so I guess maybe sometimes we don't know who's going to knock on our door, who we're going to help next. But it's, I just wanted to ask an open-ended question about like what types of like characteristics or like, personalities and values do you see that would be your perfect customer?
Right. In a myriad of industries for sure. I'm talking to some nonprofits right now. There's a foundation where I live that puts on a beautiful musical in a state park, and we've gone for about 7 years in a row. And I've just noticed the ticket prices and the whole experience has just gotten insane, and it's a vital part of where I'm from is part of in their history, okay, and they're trying to preserve it. But I see some things, and their values are there. But again, the dollar is just losing purchasing power so much, and so it's upon themselves to ask the donors, the customers, for more. And I talk with them. I'm saying, hey, what you put together brings value to where we live. Adopt this and help it grow, and that it shares the same value that you are promoting. So nonprofits, but also just about every company. I've talked with construction companies, and we talk about their pain points. Hey, your cap and OpEx costs are 20 to 30% since 2022. Okay, and you do good work here. I've seen the buildings and the homes you've built. How about if I showed you how to come in those bids 5 to 10 under your competitors, and possibly maybe you can turn around and maybe one day pay your employees in Bitcoin, so they feel that their labor isn't disintegrated by the payment of the dollar. So, yeah, talking to just about everybody about who you feel passionate about, who you will see who has that value test. Churches, I speak to several churches all the time, Rotary clubs, to kind of find out, like you said, hey, who is our customer that shares these values? And since it's a value-based endeavor, it's really a cool search. It's a tough one, but it's a really an amazing journey.
That's great. Where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Donovan Gibson. I'm pretty easy to find there, probably posting something about Bitcoin or sharing our stuff from Sovreign. You can find me on my email at sovereign.io, Sovreign.io. And you can find me on X at bitgibby99, BITGIBBY 99. So,
That's great. Thank you so much. And yeah, this is again Sovereign, spelled Sovreign. So if you come to the website, come to About Us, we have our links to our socials. And I would also just say that if any listeners want recommendations on free online courses, podcasts, articles, just again, kind of the go-to starter kit free education. Be more than happy to share with over LinkedIn or email. Just reach out, knock on our door, and yeah, just happy to help your beginning journey. Donovan, thank you for your time. It's a great conversation, and
Thanks for having me, Jeff. It was
yeah,
great.
yeah, hope to do it again soon. Okay, have a great day.
Take care.
All right, you too.